Welcome to the Focused and Fearless podcast. I'm Heather Angel and I am really excited to bring to you an Encore episode. This is an interview I recorded a little while back, and it's going to allow you, if you are a regular listener, to listen again and see if you implemented any of that incredible expert advice. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome, my lovely. It's so nice to have you here. I usually produce a fresh new podcast episode every single week. I'm currently recovering from some surgery, so for the next few weeks there are some Encore episodes which are going to be super valuable to you. So enjoy, dive in, and I will see you very soon. You're listening to the Focused and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Heather Angel, and I've been helping people tune into what lights them up and increase their personal and professional performance for over a decade. Now I'm best known as a high-performance coach, helping entrepreneurs like you cut through the noise and create a business and life on your terms. If you're ready to step out of struggle and discover how simple it can be to create a fulfilling, joyful and successful business without all the overwhelm and long hours, you're in the right place. Hey loves, welcome to a brand new week and a brand new episode of the Focused and Fearless podcast. Today I am joined by Mathews, who is going to share with you his incredible framework called Conversations That Convert. This framework is going to enable you to effectively explain what you do, how you help people, and what makes your business unique. So this is an amazing episode for every single business owner, especially those that are looking to improve their marketing. Now, Danny is also going to share how he's transitioned over the past few years from working on a multiple £billion project and why he chose to actually step away from that incredible opportunity to then take a minimum salary graphic design job to then very rapidly creating a multiple six-figure, highly successful business in branding. His story is incredible. He's the most lovely, lovely person. I've known him for a few years now, and what he shares in this episode is pure gold. So if you haven't got a notebook to hand, make sure you bookmark this episode, because you are going to want to take notes on the framework that he's going to share with you, because you can use this again and again, whether it be rewriting your website copy, tweaking your social media, or how you introduce yourself at networking events. This framework is game-changing. So without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Hey, my lovely, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so looking forward to you sharing everything about the Conversations That Convert, which I have teased the audience about already, and really telling us a little bit more about your journey and where you started and how you've got to where you are now. But before we dive into all that goodness, if you could just let the audience know who you are, what you do, and what your business is now.
Yeah, so most companies can't really very clearly say what they do, never mind actually give us a really compelling reason about why we should buy from them. So, and what I've realized over time is that for us to be really successful, as a business, as a person, we have to be really clear about what value we can give to the world or to the clients that we're serving. And I think a lot of us struggle to articulate it in a certain way. So I'm a designer by trade. I started the Danny & Co studio back in August 2019. I was a designer a few years before then, but spent 10 years in financial services after really wanting to be a designer since I was a kid. So when I started the studio, I was really excited to finally get back to my passion, which is what I've always wanted to do, and I'm sure you'll hear a bit more about that story later. What I realized when I first started the studio is that although design was my skill, it wasn't really what made me valuable as a person, as someone to work with, as a business, and my previous experience lent itself really well to branding, being the strategy, the messaging, the behaviors, the kind of the theory behind signs and symbols and colors and those kinds of things. That was really the value, and that was the thing that people wanted the most. So very quickly shifted into like a brand consultancy and strategy, business as well as a design studio. So now it's kind of split into two, and we do both, which is really exciting. It means we get to influence brands very early on and then translate them into something really amazing for everyone to see.
Yeah, I love that, because what you said there is so important. I think when I've had conversations with clients that are right at the beginning of their business, they're like, oh, they talk about brand, and then they say, I need a logo. And I'm like, right, that there's a lot of stuff you need to figure out before you go and choose a logo. It's like very much that belief that a brand is a logo. And it's like, yeah. And the 10 million layers underneath the logo.
It's funny. I had a previous client. She runs a property development or home improvements kind of construction company, and they're incredible as a business. They're not. I originally thought they were same old kind of construction business, but they're really not. She's got a really strong background in project management, and everything is planned, and the logistics are done so perfectly. She's just incredible. And we were having to talk about branding in general, and one of the questions immediately was, I've always hated our logo, but I don't know how to communicate what I want to communicate in a logo. How do I do that? And I said, you don't. That is what your brand is for. Mm. You're trying to put the spire on the church without building it first. Mm. And the only way I could explain it in, I guess, terms that she would understand is that you have to lay the foundations of a business before you build the building, and then you put the sign on the front. And it's only when you put the sign, the reason that people concentrate on logos is because it's only when they put the sign on the front that you go, this building is amazing. You can call it by a name, you can refer to it in a certain way, but actually how it was built and the insides and what it means for the town it's in or the city it's in, all those things is the brand, and that's what you need to put into it. So yes, the logo is often the first thing you see, but it should be the last thing you do.
Yeah, and that's that. Even if you guys take one thing away from the podcast, is this, because when I started my wedding business, I think I had my wedding business 4 years, went through 3 websites and 3 logos.
Yeah.
I could have done with knowing that information when I first started out.
And often you do it without actually coming up with a problem to solve or having a reason to do it. You just think it's something you need to update or change just to feel like a renewed confidence in the business, or so it's really, we focus on the really surface level stuff. And one thing that I learned really early on, whenever anyone asks me for anything, but especially a logo, my immediate question is, what is the problem? And it starts this really, people look at me really strange when that happens, because they say, so how much is a logo? And I say, well, what's the problem? They look at me really weird because it's an unusual question to ask for a designer. So yeah, but it leads to really interesting conversations about the business and problems and what they actually want to solve. And they soon realize that there's a lot more to this than just pretty pictures and scribbles.
100%, absolutely. And like I said, if there's one thing that people take away, just take away that one thing. Quite often you're right, they sort of look at things and go, oh, the website isn't working, so I need to completely redo it, or it's the color's not right. It's like, I don't think I've ever had a client say, do you know what, I hired you because I really like the combination of blue and yellow. That was my main choice. That was the main reason I went for you. I'm like, I don't think it was. So how are you, what I would love to sort of dive into is what I think is really interesting is when I asked you sort of who you help, what you do, is that was a really beautiful way of explaining it. And I think that's what I'd love for you to share with the audience, is that we had a chat offline before about how there's so much of this like structure you must put in your Instagram bio. I help X people do this and blah, 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 blah. And it's all of a sudden become this one format fits all, and everyone has to try and explain what they do in a short sentence. And like you said at the beginning, when you go, if you go to a networking meeting or if you introduce yourself, it's like, how do you actually do that? Because it all ties in with the brand and everything as well. But how do you actually explain what you do without going, oh, I'm a coach, and then someone rolls your eyes and goes, okay, well, I've met a million of you. Next.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of the problem with how we communicate what we do and the value that we provide is that we give so much away so early on. It gives people too much of a reason to really switch off and not have a reason to contact you, because it's really easy to assume what goes into what you do. So just like me, when people assume what a designer does and what goes into the process, they don't really know, and they don't really know what problems it solves. So that's up to us to describe that. And the same with people, especially professional services, coaches, consultants, accountants, HR professionals, those kinds of industries. It's really hard to start conversations, because people just assume they know what we do. When we say I'm an accountant, you go, oh, I get it. There's no compelling reason for us to actually start a conversation that's deeper than that and more meaningful than that. So I think we'll get into how we do that and how we can start those compelling conversations again.
Yeah, love to, because this is, if you're listening, grab a notebook or make sure you bookmark this episode, because this, honestly, I have rewritten my introduction, and like right at the beginning when I was in corporate, it was the elevator pitch and all these kind of things. I must have gone through this variation of processes a gazillion times in business, in corporate, and you're just like, I just want to be able to say I'm really good at what I do. Like, you just want to be like, and it's so difficult. So if you are having the same issue with your messaging and explaining what it is you do and how you help people, make sure you've got a notebook to hand, because this is going to be really, really valuable. And what do you call this process? Is it conversations?
Yeah, I call it conversations that convert. It's how to start more meaningful conversations from stage, screen, or social media. And it's really the way that I've figured out, I guess, how to start more meaningful conversations. It works especially well in networking, and that's where I kind of learned that this kind of works. But you can also use it for things like copywriting on your website, social media posts, how you open a keynote talk. So you can use it for all of those. And it helps you come up with something that is impactful about what you do, rather than just the kind of face value type stuff. There's something that I'm going to say, which it's funny when I talk about impact statements, which we'll get into in a second. The purpose is to make an impact, almost to make someone stop and go, what? And listen to you. And one of the statements I often use, which relates to branding, and you will understand it as we talk more about it, but when people talk about things like USPs and what their why is and those kinds of things, and you reminded me of this when you were talking just then, I often say you, as in you, just saying me is not your USP. And I'm sorry to say it, but your kids are not your why. And I really hate to say it, but no one cares about your business. And when you understand these things that are very face value things, and you start to dig deeper, you understand why some things might not be working for you. When someone says, what's your USP? And you say, well, it's me, because it's me in the business. I'm sorry, it's not. It's that, yes, you're not allowed to use DNA as a value proposition. I find it bizarre that we can use DNA as a value proposition. It's mental. And when you're trying to find your purpose, yes, we all love our kids, and yes, that's what we do it for, ultimately, to leave a legacy and pass something on. But honestly, no one cares. They care about the problem they have and how you're going to solve it for them. So that is hopefully what you can communicate in this conversations that convert. And yeah, we can have a giggle about that.
Amen to all of that. Honestly, it's making me laugh, because I'm like, oh my God, that is so true. But I remember doing all the, starting with why, and I was like, oh, it should be something lovely like my kids. And I'm like, really actually isn't. So when I was explaining it, I'm like, that's not going to be what works. So I will let you dive into this, because I think it's quite clear that we need to know your process.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what happens in networking specifically, because this is where I kind of learned that where this works and where it can work really, really well. So when we go into networking, we all sit around a table, there's 30 of us or however many there is. And slowly we go around the table and everyone gets a chance to do their elevator pitch. And here's a little preview of what happens. Hi, I'm Jane from Jane Accountants, and I help people understand their numbers. If you need an accountant or you need to submit tax returns, come to me and I can help you. And then it moves to the next person and he says, my name's Gary, I run Gary's Signage, and I do any kind of signage, whether it's on your car, van, on a building, and we do it at affordable rates and work locally. And they go on and on around the room, and everyone kind of follows the same path. And every now and again, there'll be one person that tells a bit of a story. So we're starting to level up a little bit, where someone says, this week, I've helped a client to get over their fear of numbers. And I sat with her and went through training. And by the end of it, she could understand it so well that she could probably do a bookkeeping herself. And that's great. You're starting to talk about the problems you solve. But still, people are making assumptions about what they think you do. For in this example, as an accountant, I use accountants because it's easy to pick on them. So I'm sorry if there's any accountants watching or listening. But it's the same for coaches, consultants, HR people. It's the same across, and designers. So I'll stick myself in that bucket. So people start to assume they know what you do as a business. Now, we have to break that pattern if we want people to listen. And there's a lot of neuroscience behind this as well. When you've listened to the same thing, even though you're sitting there and you're watching people's mouth moving, you're not actively listening and nothing is being retained. So for something to be retained, you have to be actively listening. You have to be engaged with the person talking. And the only way you can do that is by breaking the pattern. So what this Conversations That Convert framework, I guess you could call it, does is it helps you to break that pattern with the first step, which is impact statement. And in the impact statement, you're basically looking for a statistic or a fact or something that is true for your audience or your ideal client that you can use to get their attention. There's a couple of things that I need to mention through this process, which I'll mention at the end, a couple of tips that go with this. But you'll notice throughout the whole process, not once will you say what you do or what your industry is. And that's really important. That's an important distinction to make. So the impact statement you start with has to be some kind of statistic. Now, I can use a generic one. I found out a couple of weeks ago that in the UK, 770,000 businesses started in 2020. And that is a record-breaking number of all time forever. Oh 770,000 businesses. Now, if we look at statistics to do with like survival rates and those kinds of things, I think it's 735,000 will die in the first 5 years. They just won't be around anymore. That means you have to be one of the 40,000 in 5 years that are still around. So something like that is quite impactful. So if you can make that a concise statement, you're off to a good one. It gets people's attention. If the more specific it is to your industry and what you do, the better. So for example, you've already heard mine and you didn't even realize. So my opening impact statement is a statement that is true for my audience, who are in the majority service providers. So when Jane tells me she's an accountant and she helps with her numbers, and I think it was Gary who does signs and he's affordable and local. When they come to me, I say if I'm in a room for an accountant, for example, most accountants can't clearly tell me what they do. Never mind give me a compelling reason about why I should buy from them. And that is a statement that is true for my audience, that if you're an accountant and you struggle to say what you do in a really concise way, you're going to be listening, because next I'm going to tell you what the solution is to that problem. And that's the second part. So impact statement first. Get their attention, get them actively listening. The people who aren't listening at that point aren't your clients. So if you see some eyes wander, don't worry about it. You're looking for the people that you can directly help. So number two, the solution. You're now looking for not just what you do, not just helping people with the numbers, for example. You're looking for the solution to whatever problem you solve. And I'll come on to the third part in a minute, which is the result, but the result and the solution are very different. So what we're looking for in the step number two is how you uniquely solve the problem. It might be through a process. It might be a specific way you do things. It might be maybe a tool that you use, or a model or framework that you use. It could be a system, a software, it could be anything. But the more that you can tell someone the unique way you solve the problem, the less likely they are to consider competitors, because all of a sudden you're on an island, you're on your own. So I have a trademark brand program called the Brand Confidence Advantage. No other person in the world does that, because it's a combination of different things, tasks and models and frameworks that I take people through, that is trademarked within the brand confidence trademark. No one else has access to that. So even if someone else does a similar program, the perception of it is that it's unique, you can't get it anywhere else, and it takes you through a process for a specific transformation. That is how we uniquely solve a problem. And as part of that, it goes back to the being able to say what you do and the compelling reason about why people should buy from you. So that's number 2. That is how you uniquely solve the problem. So consider the things in your business that you use: systems, processes, models, frameworks, all those kinds of things, and put them into a concise sentence that will explain that to someone without you saying, I'm an accountant or I work in the accountancy sector, for example. And then it's number 3. So number 3 is result. It's really, really important to understand that the solution you provide to a problem is different to the result someone gets from working with you. So the solution to the problem is that you use a particular process to go from A to Z, for example. But the result of working with you could be something like more work-life balance, better family time, increased profit. It's the actual result they get from working with you rather than just solving a particular problem. Yeah. So that's the last part. And to be honest, once you've done the first and second part, the last part will come fairly easily if you really think about the effects it has, I guess, long-term on them working with you. So you can look at business or personal. Yeah. If your client is maybe people rather than businesses, then it would be maybe around work-life balance or something around there. If it's a business, it might be increased profit, retention of staff. It could be any of those problems that you're solving or results of working with you.
Yeah, amazing. I think it's I'm going to let you sort of go. I know you've got a couple of other little tips on there as well, but I just think it's really important for people to grasp that number 2 and number 3 are different. Very, very different. The solution and the result is very, very different. And I think quite often the result part is completely forgotten about. Mm-hmm. And that's the emotive bit. That's the bit that's going to make me go, oh, yeah, actually, I really want that. I really want the work-life balance. I really want someone to just take my accounts off my hands and mean that I don't have to stress about it and that I'm going to get loads of tax refunds or whatever. So, they want, that's the result. So I think it's really, really important that people make sure they distinguish, because I do see people try something similar to what you've said, and they'll talk about the problem, they'll talk about the solution, and then it's like, that's it. And I'm like, I still don't really care that much.
So, it's essentially you're bringing out the emotional side of what this does for people. You're telling them that here's your problem, here's how we solve it, but by solving it, it's going to have a much bigger impact to your life or business than you actually thought. And one way that I've helped people to dig down into what that is something I learned in software development when I've worked on designing and building apps. Software development have this process in user experience design where they go through something called 5 whys, and it's really trying to dig down into the problem you're solving. So if you think you have a problem, ask why. Why is that a problem? Why is it important to solve it? Why is it a problem in the first place? And if you can get to 5 on that list of 5 whys, you've done a really good job. But if you can only get to 3 or 4 and you really, really can't dig any deeper, you've probably got your answer already. So that's a really good tip and a really good way to kind of figure out what the real problem is rather than what the perceived problem is sometimes. So a couple of tips in that process. Number 1 is what I do is sometimes I teach this and then I'll see someone at a networking thing and they actually tell me, I'm going to use Danny's intro this time. It's so funny to see it. Like they actually tell me they're going to use it like a primer. But when people do it, they because they're in this habit of we're humans at the end of the day, and we're taught to respond to certain things. So when someone says, what do you do? Or it's your turn, you tend to just go straight in with an introduction. Try and hold back on the introduction. If you don't say your name, your business, or what the industry you work in as part of this introduction, then it's fine. Like, no one needs to know your name. It's really not that important. If you've told them the problem that you solve, what their problem is, and the problem that you solve, and the result of working with you, they're going to want to have a conversation. And it's funny whenever I go to networking things where they break out into rooms on Zoom and that kind of thing, the first thing people will say is, what did you say you did again? Because I haven't told them. And I say, well, I haven't told you, so I can tell you now, and then you can have a conversation. And that's really the goal with this. The goal with it is not to tell everyone that you're fantastic. The goal with it is to say what you need to say to get people to start a conversation with you. They should be coming to you after and saying, I really liked what you said. How do you do that? That's where your meaningful conversation starts. So if you don't say your name or what you do or any of that, don't worry. That's kind of the point. So the other tip is just refrain from introducing yourself. Hold back. Don't go to, the impact statement is there for a reason. It's to break patterns. It's to make an impact. Don't be tempted to say, I'm Jane from Jane Accountants, and then go into your impact statement, because you've lost it. You've lost all impact or possibility of making an impact on people. So refrain from doing that. And then the final tip for me to give you is really just tweak it. Tweak it as you go along. Have it as an active thing next to your computer or whatever, and just say it over and over and over and over again. If you've got a team, tell your team to say it. So people that join Danny & Co will become suppliers. They get directed to a link, and it literally says, most companies can't clearly say what they do. Never mind, give me a reason about why we should buy from them and all the rest of it. And then at the bottom, it just says, when anyone asks what you do, this is what you say. And that's the first bit of onboarding for anyone who comes into the business. Yeah. So tell your teams to say it, put it on the website. It doesn't have to be on the homepage. It can be on the about, whatever it is. And say it everywhere you go. And you will start more conversations that convert to sales, because you're having more conversations.
I love that. It's so, what I think is so beautiful about that is, we are living in very much an online world at the moment. Businesses have gone online in 2020 and are now realizing that maybe they're going to be online a lot longer than they planned. And I think this is, I can't wait until I can get back in a room full of people. I think networking is something I've missed the most, but this can be used in every way. So if you are even starting, a webinar, or if you're doing an introduction on an online networking call, or again, the website copy, I think there's so many, I'm already thinking now, I'm like, actually, I could change my intro. I could actually put the impact statement first. And, I know it's going to be hard. So many people are going to try and do this and go, my name is, oh man.
You will stumble, you will fall. Don't worry, just keep tweaking it. It should be a fluid thing. When the start of mine, where I say most companies, changes all the time, because I say most HR consultants, most accountants, most coaches, etc. Something that is quite fluid can work pretty well. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people are going online, and we used to live in a world of villages. And in the village, you'd have one baker and one grocer and one post office and one shop. And there was never really any need for competition. If anyone went to the shop and they asked, do you know where I can send this parcel? They'd say, sure, the post office around the corner. Yeah. And while we were a world of small villages, that's what happens. But as they grow and as there becomes more and more competition, that really do the same as us, say the same as us, have similar pricing, all those kinds of things. You really have to figure out a way to not just stand out, but be able to communicate what's valuable about working with you over anyone else, and what is unique about what you do. So that's really where I try to focus, and obviously lends itself really well to branding as a process.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think what's interesting is you were saying, you mentioned when you were going through the process that you used the 5 why system, and you learned that when you were developing software and apps. So that's sort of given us a little hint, like you've done a lot of different things that have led up to this amazing business that you have now. So I would really like for you to share, because I do think it's so important. We can see you now, successful business, you're doing the branding, you know, sharing all this amazing insight. And is it a membership that you said that you have as well? Is that what it is?
It's a program. I've considered a membership just for making it accessible for more people. You know, not a lot of people can, especially in the smaller micro business community, you know, in post-pandemic world, can afford to spend a few thousand to figure this stuff out. But if you know, if there was access to smaller masterclasses and nuggets, which, you know, I do a masterclass every Friday now, and try to give people some access and some tasters into how they can do specific things. I think that's a good idea. So I am considering a membership. You know, stay tuned for stuff like that.
Yeah, but the branding when you have at the moment, that's a program, is it?
Yeah, so that's a set 8-week program. So really the idea is for people to be taken out of the day-to-day, to work on the business for a period of time. You know, the tasks are like 20 minutes to an hour. There's group coaching, there's one-to-one support as well, and the community elements have been really, really helpful as well for people to share experience and from different industries. And I've had people like makeup artists and HR consultants, but also there's a guy that runs I have to, instead of getting tongue-tied, it's a model railway scenery making company.
Oh,
so they basically make trees and bridges and buildings and those with like 3D printing, you know, and he's going through it. So there's a real diverse kind of businesses in there. It's been great, and it's become the core business over the last year, which has been brilliant, a great transition to make. Which
is incredible. And I share this briefly in the intro, but you know, I met you many years ago when you developed this incredible piece of software for the financial industry, and we met at sort of networking events and things. So now you've got this incredible branding company, and you know, you're helping people and business owners really step into what their brand is. How did you go from financial apps and services to this? Because that's quite a pivot, and I don't even like that word. That word drives me crazy. Like that's a transition and a half.
Yeah.
So how did that
big
happen?
Yeah, I guess I mentioned towards the start that I always wanted to be a designer as a kid. It was always in my head. In reality, if my dreams came true as a kid, I would now be making, I don't know, cartoons or computer games for Nintendo, or animating in Tokyo in Japan for animated films and that kind of thing. I loved all that stuff as a kid. It was such a passion of mine. And if you walked into my bedroom as a kid, number one, you'd probably trip over some pens or crayons. You'd probably land with your face in some sharpener lead that is on the floor. You'd probably sniff some lead in, and then get up to a pile of sketchbooks like this high. Wow. You know, they were just everywhere. I loved the whole, and even now you'll see behind me, I've this picture here is basically homage to my childhood. It's a character called Totoro from a Japanese film that was eventually redubbed, I guess, for the American market. But it's called My Neighbor Totoro. It's about this guy who's a forest spirit, and these two girls move into a new house with their dad, and their mum's in hospital, and it's just a beautiful story. It really captured my imagination about these creatures that you could just come up with out of thin air, and it was just beautiful. So that was always a real passion of mine. So but the problem is that I think with a lot of creative industries, whether you're singer-songwriters have it, actors have it, artists have it, you know, creators in general have it. There's not that encouragement in early education to say that is a career, or that is a business, or you can make something out of that yourself. So I never really thought about it after school. I just went and got a job like everyone else. I didn't really grow up in a great area. My mum was a single parent with me and my sister. It just wasn't great, you know. She never had any money, so I just felt like that was the way I had to go. So I had loads of jobs over the years. eventually settled for a job in private health insurance, working for an agent in Birmingham. And I really grew to love the industry. It was great. It was because private medical insurance isn't really a necessity. It's meant to complement the NHS. So it's, private hospitals and stuff. It's a bit more of a luxury, which means the people buying it have like stories to tell about family illnesses and things that they've overcome because they had better treatment and all these things. And I really enjoyed that part of the job, just learning about how people's stories can really impact what they buy and how they buy and those kinds of things. And over time, I thought, I want this guy's job. He's obviously earning the big bucks. So I was really interested in doing that, and eventually took a job where I am now in the Cotswolds and Cirencester to start a group medical insurance department for a broker. And I did that for a while before going self-employed and setting up with an old colleague. And we basically grew from private medical insurance to protection to then mortgages. Which is kind of the start of the story, really, because the second, let's talk realistically. So it probably took me about 4 weeks to realize that the mortgage industry was broken, that the process was insane.
Yeah.
And that I would have to spend 15, if you said to me, come work in this industry, what will happen is you'll travel around a lot, you'll drive a lot, you'll spend 15 hours working on a mortgage for a client, including research and paperwork and all the rest of it. And you'll do that before you even know if you're going to get paid at the end of it. Yeah. I would have been like, what? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, why would you do that? So I immediately saw this problem that was in the mortgage industry, and I enjoyed it. I'd been in it for so long that you get to a certain point, I think, in a job or a career where you think there's no going back now. I'm kind of stuck. Yeah. That's what I thought at the time, but I was still in my 20s, so far from the truth. So eventually, I thought I need to fix this, and that's, I think, when we met, when I put together a proof of concept, basically, that was called Morgie. And it was a way for brokers to get online applications for mortgages so they could filter them to be able to give them advice, be able to direct them where they go next. Can they actually get a mortgage, or should they go away and save more deposit? Could we refer them to someone else who deals with maybe bad credit or single parents or self-employment? So I built this proof of concept and tested it with my own business, which was great. Loved the whole process. It was the first time I'd ever designed a system, I guess, gone through that process. But I spent a lot of time learning about technology and how it works and how it could work, and automation and all kinds of stuff. So it was such a big learning process. And that really was the start of something great, but also the start of something terrible that eventually led me to starting the studio. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. But I guess in a long-winded roundabout way, to answer your question about how I made that shift, I found myself in central London with no feeling from the waist down, because a can of ginger beer just exploded in my bag and killed the laptop that had a lot of the work that I was doing at the time. Because what happened is I built Morgie, and even though it was a proof of concept, there were people that were asking me to invest in it or buy it, and it just wasn't possible, because it was just like, I just clunked these systems together and it worked, so that was really interesting. But one company did say, can you just come and build it for us, like properly? Can you take the concept that you have, come and build it for us? We're going to go and bid for a humongous contract worth about £3.5 billion. And this is going to help us win it. And so I went and did it for 15 months. It was a exciting process, but also I saw too much of the industry and just fell out of love with it, really. And that final straw of me being pulled off the floor by strangers was the last straw, I think. And ever since then, I spoke to someone about, I guess, neurology and science and biology. And they said, usually when you lose feeling from the waist down, that's literally your nervous system telling you to stop. So it was terrible. It was 4 a.m. to midnight kind of days, traveling backwards and forwards to London. It was big. And then eventually I just said, I'm done. I'm out. And finally had the encouragement to do what I really wanted to do. And my wife, I think, was the first person to say, maybe you could do that design thing as a job.
Yeah, the design drawing thing that you're naturally gifted at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was the first time I think anyone showed any real encouragement in making it a career choice or a business, really. So yeah, long-winded way to answer your question, but it gives you.
I think this is so important because I've had people on the podcast before, and we've discussed, we hear in the business world burnout a lot, and I think it sort of gets overused, but people don't necessarily realize that. I see this happening so often with so many. Yeah. I see it with clients, and I'm like, I'm just giving you a heads up, you might want to slow down now and regroup, and they're like, no, I'll keep going, and then they come back and go, I'm starting to feel really tired. I'm like, yes, this is the point, you need to stop. So with with your situation, to sort of give a little bit more concept to the audience, that this was a huge deal for you, for you and your family. This was big money. If you managed to create this incredible program for them, this is big money. And I don't know if people heard, but it wasn't that deal that he was talking about wasn't millions, it was billions. Billions. Okay, this is a big deal. So how do you, when you reflect back now, when you sort of think, you were pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and obviously it did get to the point where your body was like, right, he's not listening to any of the signs we've given him already, let's cut off feeling to his legs, let's see if that will wake him up. So when you look back now, did you realize that there were signs when you were like, actually this is not right for me, whether it be business wise or for your health? Were there signs earlier on?
Not early on, but earlier. So I probably didn't realize until there was a little bit of a relationship breakdown, I guess, professionally. And I started to question who I was working with, what this was actually for. I guess I never questioned the purpose of me doing it, whether it was a money thing or whether it was an impact thing or whatever. In all honesty, I tried to reflect and think back about the steps along the way and what are the things that I could have identified and said, actually, you should probably slow down. But in all honesty, my energy was so high every day, just with excitement that I get to do this thing, but then conflicting with the things that I saw on a day-to-day basis in meetings and things that were against my ethics and things. That was the only time where I thought, I'm not sure this is me. And I just wanted the whole process to be over. I was like, can we just finish this now and get it out of the way? But, that wasn't something I could control. So I guess I'd love to say I noticed really early on some signs and I could have probably turned it around, but I didn't. I wish I did. It was probably 2 months before it happened when I started to spot the signs. And it really was. It took that final straw. As ridiculous as it sounds, it took that kind of ginger beer bursting in my bag because I've been running late for coaches and trains and stuff. I think it took that for me to trigger me to say, this is if the smallest thing can damage you emotionally that much, there's something else wrong. And that was the end, really. I literally went round the corner to the office where I was having a almost like a wrap-up meeting, really. It was like the last time I would be there. And I think because it was so close, I was just like, we need to get it out of the way. So I just went in and said, I'm done. There's nothing's going to happen from this point forward. Yeah, and here's the stuff. You can have it. I don't know what I've lost because my laptop's dead, but whatever it is, we'll rebuild it. We'll make sure it's done, and then we'll transfer it and call it a day. For context for people, at that point, the idea was that I would be contracted to build the software, and then they would offer me a humongous, life-changing, ridiculous offer to become the chief digital officer of the business. And it would have been a massive deal for my family. And instead, I ended up at a minimum wage design job and a print company in Gloucester. Because, what was the alternative at the end of the day? And it's funny, now I speak to people that have a lot of money and that have kind of made their millions, or whatever, however you want to describe them. And it's really comforting to know that we are in the same headspace, knowing that money's not that important, but them having it and me not so much. Not that, I'm doing okay. But knowing that money isn't the difference in their life, and it also isn't mine, is really comforting. Knowing that we're in such different space, such different practical spaces, but the same headspace is interesting. So it's been good to get to know that.
And I think that's really, really important to understand, because I've been through this process myself, and I've seen it with clients where they're like, once they get, in the coaching industry, especially on the online space, Jesus Christ, the whole 6-figure thing drives me crazy. So everyone's like, I need a 6-figure launch. It's like, are we going for 900,000 or are we going for 100,000?
Yeah, exactly.
Where are we going?
I was just about to say, well, like, what is the idea there? Is it that they want to be seen to be at the top end? Oh. But like it's like, as soon as you hit 100 grand, you can now say you're a 6-figure earner, but because that makes it sound like you're at the 900 grand level, but you're not. There's like such a big gap. It's crazy.
It absolutely drives me bonkers, because also, you see a lot of people say, I just had a 6-figure launch. I'm like, yeah, but I know you spent about 50 grand on Facebook ads. So I'm not quite sure where your profit margin is here, love. So you still see, I still get clients go, I want to get to that 6-figure mark. So once we actually figure out what that number actually is for them, it's so interesting. And I say it to them, I'm like, whenever you get to that number, nothing's going to change. That number of the figure in your bank account, unless you are 100% at peace and with purpose in what you're doing, the money in the bank makes diddly squat difference. Just doesn't.
Yes.
We are so easy to chase the number. And don't get me wrong, like, I like having money in my bank. It's nice to have the money in your bank, but it's amazing how many I had my 5-figure launch or my 6-figure launch. I don't feel how I thought I would feel. I'm like, I know.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I've heard it so many times. The people that say, I thought I'd wake up in this like different state. Like, I thought I'd wake up with $1 million in the bank in this meditative state, like really happy with life. And I woke up just like, have breakfast to go work then, shall I? Like, it's the same. It's same old stuff. Yeah, it's really bizarre. But I mean, some of the people I speak to about goals and vision and mission and some of their early intentional branding stuff, the numbers that come out, like, what's the goal? 1 million. Why? Why? What does that get you? And most people haven't really thought about it beyond being someone who earns 1 million. And I know for this business, I can run a team of 8 to 12 and have a really good salary, an incredible profit margin that gives me a 6 month runway for any event I'm unaware of, on about 380 grand a year. And have an amazing team and give me the freedom to start new things, to test new things, to try. That's why I was talking about the membership earlier. Like, that's a way that I can see I can help people that I now have time for, because I've leveraged other parts of the business. And so I think we forget that we don't need as much as we think we need. And I remember someone doing an experiment, I think, or a process where you basically figure out what you want in life and figure out how much it's going to cost you in mortgage, lease for a car, or a holiday every 3 months or whatever. How much is that going to cost you, broken down to months, weeks, then days? And for most people, I think it works out, you can earn, I can't remember what it is daily, but for most people, you can have a mansion in the country with a beautiful car and a horse and 3 holidays a year for like a month at a time. And you probably only need about 800 quid a day. And when you think about it like that, that's not that hard. Like, you can build that up over time. You can have, if you had, I don't know, maybe a few hundred clients paying you 100 to 300 quid a month or whatever, you're nearly there. You've pretty much got the life of your dreams, and you just need to work towards that. So that should be the goal, not a million as like a arbitrary pluck out of the clouds kind of number. So I'm all about giving stuff purpose and making sure you're doing it for a reason. Absolutely.
And alignment is just so important, because chasing after the numbers just it's so empty for a lot of the entrepreneurs or business owners that I work with. They're so heart-centered and giving, and they just love what they do, and they're like, I just want to do it, and I do it even if it was for free. And it's like, okay, well, keep doing that, and the money just flows anyway, rather than be like, I must make this much today and blah 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 blah.
Do you know that is probably my biggest lesson of the last 4 years or so, is that I used to think, because I ran a business for so long, I used to think business brought in the business, not the creativity. But actually I realized that it's the creativity that brings in the money. So what would happen is that I would advertise as if I was a business about business things. Yeah. I know this is a really technical conversation. I would talk about the business stuff in a hope that would bring in business. And then I would post some work that I did for someone, and I'd get floods of people in my inbox asking me to do a similar thing. And I was like, what? This is so weird. I'm not even advertising, but I am really. Yeah. I'm showing my work and showing the work of the studio and what we do and the clients we serve. And funnily enough, there's similar clients doing similar things, want the same thing. Mm. And I realized after a while that I can post a brochure design that one of us has done on LinkedIn, and at least 1 or 2 people will say, I'm looking for a brochure, similar thing to what you posted, how much is that, kind of thing. And I'm like, it's mental. But I was always under the impression that I needed to be this business person to be able to grow and to be able to actually bring in work and money. And I don't. I just need to be who I am, creative, coming up with ideas, concepts, sharing things that I'm thinking about, all those things. So it's been an amazing realization. I wish I learned that so much earlier. You're like 15 years earlier. Yeah.
I think something you said earlier about that in schools, if it's not an academic subject, artistry and creativity, it's not nurtured. I'm actually home educating. I took my kids out of school consciously. And when I looked at the national curriculum, I literally was scrolling. I think I was about 225 pages down, and that was maths and English. And then this time, I don't know why I'm doing this, it's a podcast, no one can see, but this time like maybe 30, 40 pages of, oh, by the way, there's art, music, geography, like all these other things. I was like, wow. Oh my goodness. And, my kids are super creative. I was like, okay, well, good choice made. Because it's not valued, and it's so valuable. It's so valuable to have all these different skills in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a friend who's homeschooled her boy forever. He's never really been to a school until now, actually. I think he's about 12 or 11 or 12. But their homeschooling consists of things like archery and like these things that you probably wouldn't never do them at school, but it would be really rare for that to be a curriculum. And he learns about like astrology and like, because she calls the shots, and she's like, if I'm homeschooling my kid, I'm taking responsibility for what they learn, and we'll do the core stuff, the maths, English, science, and all that kind of stuff. But if he doesn't want to do history, bothered. But it turns out he's really interested in stuff like history and geography, so I think we can just learn in different ways. I have considered what I would do in a self-tutored, homeschooled kind of scenario. Something that I am thinking about a lot at the minute, having a second one on the way. So
yes. Yeah, well, having two is very different, I will say. Maybe just get through the first year.
Yeah.
And plan out the home education after
then
that.
we'll figure it out. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
This has been amazing. There's just one thing I would love to just touch on before we wrap up, because you were honest enough and vulnerable enough to say that, you went from this potential huge salary, crazy salary, big house in London, all the things, to taking a minimum wage job in a design company. How did you go with the mental strength to go from, okay, well, now this is my life, I'm in a minimum wage job and I've got a family and house and all that kind of stuff to support, and I'm going to be sexist here, but as a man as well, to be like, holy cow, I've got these responsibilities and I'm now in that job, to building what has become a really successful, amazing job that you love to do. And I ask this because I see too much ego getting in the way of business owners, and especially now where maybe business isn't necessarily going as to plan, or they're not bringing in enough, and the very idea of taking a job or employed work is just like, well, I can't do that because then I'll be a failure, or I can't possibly do something that they see as less than what they had. And I think your jump was huge, from potentially big house in London, huge salary, minimum wage job, to now having this wildly successful business. How did you mentally cope with that transition?
There was no alternative. There was nothing else. Someone was telling me, if that's what you love to do, then just go and do it. That person happened to be my wife, but it could have been anyone. But I was in such a state that all I needed was that, and it could have been from anyone. So on the face of it sounds like such a massive transition, and realistically it was, and it was tough, but it only helped me understand more about myself and more about what made me and my wife happy, what made us as a family happy, and considering what the alternative was, which was to go back to that, to go back to what broke me. It was just not even an option. So the other option was, really the reason that I didn't go and set up the studio earlier was actually a mistake. I should have just set it up straight away. Because the reason that I went and got a job is because I thought I needed to know more about the creative industry and how it worked as an agency before I did it. And immediately when I joined the company, I realized I didn't. I already had the skills that, because I'd run a business before, I already had what I needed to start another business in a different industry. There was nothing different from the creative industry than any others, really. And at the very basics, to communicating with clients, to managing expectations, all those kinds of skills. And I outgrew it really quickly. And in all honesty, I had a great time there. Made some really good friends, and it was an amazing experience to be in a business like that. It was fun, if anything. I got to sit in a room all day with a bunch of designers talking about design stuff. Like, it was a dream. But yeah, I left to set up the studio, and that was the only option for me. But saying that, and kind of relating to your question, it wasn't always easy. There are times where I've been to drive and deliver parcels for Amazon back in the day, because I didn't have a choice. That's what I had to do. I've worked in a warehouse for Ocado, the early morning shift, and then worked for the rest of the day trying to build clients up and doing business. When it's I was speaking to someone before, and they were saying, when you because I always talk about like that I'm really happy, and I am, and but I find it hard to explain it to other people in a way that isn't just me going, I'm so happy and you're not. But the only way that I can explain it is when someone asks me the question, okay, so if you found your purpose and you know what you're doing and this is it for you, and all you're doing every day is living your dream or living your purpose, so what now? Like, isn't that what next? I'm like, well, I'm no longer an issue, and I no longer have a problem that I need to solve for me, so I just solve them for everyone else. And the perspective I have is meaningful because I get to focus on everyone else instead of me. I think there's an old saying, isn't there, to help it, the old Zig Ziglar thing about helping everyone else reach their goals, and because you will reach yours along the way. That's what it's all about. Absolutely. So yeah, it's going to be hard for some people to make a transition right now, whether they've been made redundant or left a job or just wanted to start a new thing on the side or whatever it might be. But there is never, I would never tell someone not to go and get a job. In the meantime, if they're struggling, you just have to think about, it's practical at the end of the day. Yeah. It's not even like a pride thing. It's just practical, like pay the bills and do other stuff on the side. Yeah. If it hit the fan and I had to close the business, I'd still be doing it. I just wouldn't be earning money from it. Yeah. So yeah, for as long as I'm doing it and people are requesting it, I might as well charge for it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's all it is, really. So yeah.
And I think it's a really beautiful point about the purpose as well. And it is hard to explain. I know we talked about this before the call, that once you get into that place of like, oh, I'm here and I feel like I'm just in flow, and words like alignment come up and you're like, yeah, I'm doing this, and then you can focus on service. You can focus 100% on all the other people because you're like, oh, everything's pretty good here. So
yeah, do you know what?
Explain it.
Do you know what? Let me put that in a much clearer way. Now that I'm doing what I love, I only have one purpose, and that is to advance the human race through creativity. And it doesn't matter the route we go to do that. That means that I'm always looking for the next problem to solve. I'm always finding what part of the way that we live, work, drive, walk, eat, sleep, what part of the human race needs help, and how can I work towards that in a meaningful way. So the United Nations has 17 global sustainability goals. They're things like no poverty, no hunger, economic improvement, better work conditions, all those things. There's 17 of them. But number 17 is partnering with people to achieve the other 16 goals. And if one thing I'd say to people, that if you're struggling to find a kind of purpose or something that has meaning that you want to work towards, just go and have a look at that. And you'd be surprised throughout your journey in life and your story, you will be able to attach to one of those. I could very easily attach to no poverty because I came from not a very nice background. I love the better education goal that they have because I want there to be creative education in the world, and maybe one day that will be part of it. There's a great guy called Chris Do from the future who's wants to teach 1 billion people to do work that they love. So he teaches creatives about the business kind of elements, and he's just got an amazing purpose. So my life is built up of these pockets of change that I want to have an influence on, to that ultimate purpose of advancing humanity through creativity. So whether that's helping students or businesses or whatever it is, I'll always find a way to do that. Money isn't even a part of it. It's not even an object. It's not part of the sentence. It's just what I do now. Yeah. So that's kind of what I mean when I talk about purpose. I think it was a bit fluffy before, and I think when I put that context around it, it makes you think, actually, yeah, I could go and pick a goal and work towards that, and that would be it. That's the thing you work towards forever, because it's so close to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really beautiful. I hope people, in fact, well, share the link. I'll put the link in the United Nations. I'll put the link to that so you can actually go through that, because I think that's the world needs more of people aiming for a greater purpose right now. So Danny, this has been lush. Thank you for coming onto the podcast. Where can people find you? Like, where's the best place for people to get in touch with you and find out about what you do?
So website's probably the simplest place. It's dannyand.co. Dead simple. If you want to find me online, social media wise, I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm at The Actual Danny, including LinkedIn, just linkedin.com/The Actual Danny. You can find me there.
Amazing. And I have been seeing quite a few of your Facebook lives, and you're on Instagram as well, so check him out on Instagram as well. Like, it's always little chats on his stories, so you can find him all across social media. Thank you so much, Danny. I will let you get back to your family and your work, and I will see you very soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Focused and Fearless podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation or have a question that you would like answered in an upcoming episode, head over to Instagram and connect with me at Heather Angel Coaching. If you enjoy this podcast, please share your thoughts in a review on iTunes. I truly value your feedback, and I take the time to read every single review. Have a beautiful week, and I'll see you in the next episode.